At this point, you're an idiot. There is no plan with any policy from Trump. How's the plan you claim existed coming along in the Middle East, William? Those are just a couple of the comments that I searched up on my channel. But it is easy enough to find similar sentiments about Trump's lack of a plan for the Iran war on other channels or elsewhere in the social media landscape. Allow me to be blunt. This type of political commentary is not helping anyone. Not even the people who are typing those words. On a personal level, let's get one thing straight right now. I said that the White House had a plan. I never said it was a good plan. It should not be hard to understand that one does not imply the other, but here I am now, apparently needing to explicitly point that out. What I have said, repeatedly, is that this war is a real-time experiment. Interventions historically follow active protest movements, not the other way around. The strategy that we are watching be attempted is unprecedented. That should immediately raise a skeptical eyebrow, though we should be careful not to write the final chapter on this war until the war actually ends. And I know that these comments were not written in good faith. You can immediately see it from their tone. Apparently, I am a MAGA Trump supporter, and now is their opportunity to dunk on me, as though I am the protagonist in this story, and not the United States of America, which I also pointed out is taking a huge risk as a country, not as an administration, but as a country, right as the war began. Well, as a starting point, I invite you to watch my last 500 videos and give me a timestamp where I say whom I voted for in 2024 or 2020, or where I declared my party affiliation, or which candidates I have donated money to in the past. Spoilers, you cannot, because I do not talk about those things. Not because I lack political opinions, I do have them. Not because I lack thoughts about actions that the United States takes from administration to administration. I have those as well. But because I am just a man, standing in front of a black mirror, asking my parasocial viewer to love nonpartisan analysis of security affairs. Because, let me tell you something, the world that we live in sucks, and it is getting worse. If the United States wants to come out on top of this, then we cannot, under any circumstance, have our national security policy get poisoned by the same political polarization that has destroyed the rest of American politics. We might as well pack up our bags and go home right now. So getting back to those attempts to dunk on me, well, it is still not going to work because I am sitting here at mid-court. You actually want to win elections, right? 2026? 2028? Last I looked, dunks are only worth 2 points. Heck, those are 2 internet points. Ooh. But elections? Now those are the championships. And this type of attitude is not going to win an election. So in a nod to Matthew 5:39, let me turn the other cheek and offer you free political advice and a refresher of how the US government works. And just to be clear, I am doing this in a professional, political scientist capacity. Me telling you how to win an election is not necessarily my own political endorsement of that election outcome. If you think Donald Trump did not have a plan for this war, implicitly you are saying that the Biden administration did not have a plan either. That is because Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and the rest were not responsible for crafting a plan to militarily defeat the Ayatollah and ensure freedom of navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. That has never, ever been a task for the White House. That has always been a responsibility for the Pentagon. If Donald Trump did not have a plan to accomplish those goals, then the rest of those presidents were also asleep at the wheel. Because even if they chose not to activate them, a point that we will return to in a minute, it is a U.S. government responsibility to always have those contingency plans ready. When you say that President Trump did not have a plan, you are not disparaging Donald Trump. You are disparaging everyone who works at the Pentagon, both civilian and uniformed. the vast majority of whom are career officials who work across presidential administrations. You are disparaging everyone who works at the State Department, who drew up the blueprints to handle the political fallout. Again, the vast majority of whom are career officials who work across presidential administrations. Here is something interesting that I have kept my eye on since the war began. In October 2024, I made a video about the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. A recurring sentiment from the comments section over the past month is how I, a basic YouTuber, was capable of better understanding the incentives than anyone in the US government. That misunderstands the flow of knowledge. The only reason I was able to produce that video is because of the US government. Things like reading reports that come out of the Pentagon, news stories about leaks from there as well, and my own conversations with folks in the military. My warning that the closure of the Strait of Hormuz would be a nightmare scenario in the Middle East was not my personal assessment. It was my addition on top of what has been a military preoccupation for decades. But let's imagine that the general sentiment of these comments is correct. Fast forward to October. The war is over. We have 2020 hindsight. The war was a disaster. We have returned to the status quo ex ante. The Iranian government still stands, and maybe I no longer even need a stick figure representation of the supreme leader. Iran's nuclear program has not been meaningfully disabled, and Iran quickly replenishes its ballistic missile and drone stockpiles. The United States is enfeebled, and everyone is waiting for the other shoe to drop along the Taiwan Strait. Even then, may I suggest not framing Trump's fundamental failure as not having had a plan for the Iran war? Again, these arguments may win internet points from co-partisans, but they will not win votes from people who do not share your same political predilections. Anyone with an ounce of political education and awareness will immediately recognize it as a nakedly partisan statement, devoid of any understanding of how policymaking actually works in the government. It also stokes memories of 2016 and 2024, when so many on the left completely failed to empathize with how anyone might be interested in voting for Trump. And rather than try to court them, they just get dismissed as deplorable. Then, oops, Trump wins the election. So, in this hypothetical world that may or may not be realized, depending on what happens with the war, here is what you should be saying, again, conditional on the bad outcome occurring. Trump failed to make a good policy decision given the information in front of him, and his own earlier policy decisions exacerbated the problem. That is it. That is all you have to say. No dunking. No attempts to score political points. Just a calm, factual statement. And now that you have not immediately triggered the shields of partisanship that independents have learned to raise, you can expand further on the argument. The Pentagon crafts military options. It is not the Pentagon's responsibility to decide whether to implement them. The US Constitution explicitly recognizes the president as the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The decision to go to war is a political one, and it is rightfully delegated to a civilian. You would not want to live in a country where it is any other way. The president may ask the Pentagon for options. The Pentagon will deliver them to the president, along with some frank assessments of how likely they are to succeed and how costly they will be. It is ultimately the president's job to compare those options to what the president can obtain by trying to negotiate a resolution instead. In this particular case, there are reports that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, urged caution. Yes, the Pentagon had a plan on how to reopen the Strait of Hormuz if it became necessary, but like everyone else in the national security community, they knew it would be a mess even if the countermeasures were successful. This is why presidents past have not taken actions that would lead to the strait's closure. Well, the president weighed those options versus how he felt about the political alternatives, and he chose to fight. What we have observed afterward is all a consequence of that decision. Harry Truman once said that the buck stops here, at the president's desk. the same desk that Trump now occupies. That means he gets credit for making the decision if it goes right, or the blame for making the decision if it goes wrong. But to go one step further, the president slashed a whole bunch of government jobs in the year prior that would have improved the outcome. Think about everyone in the State Department who could have worked with partner countries in the region to work on contingency plans as the war unfolded. Think about the bureau inside of the Pentagon that was once responsible for reducing civilian casualties, but no longer does. Because that is the real problem. In war, you cannot avoid unfortunate contingencies. It is impossible to reduce civilian casualties to zero. But you are responsible for whether you do your due diligence to minimize those bad outcomes. And the Trump administration chose to save the government a little bit of money instead. Penny wise, pound foolish. If you want to claim that Trump failed in this war effort, do not say that Trump lacked a plan. Argue instead that he was not competent enough to realize that it was worse than the alternatives in front of him. That is how you convince skeptical voters. Do not make it personal. Do not start with the premise that any other political opinions but your own are foolish. Just stick to the boring facts, present a coherent argument, and let the argument speak for itself. Because here's the thing. Today was a rant about how liberals do a poor job of courting moderates. If the policy issues of the day were a little different, I could have made the same rant about how conservatives also do a poor job of courting moderates. As it stands, even after today's video, you still do not know my political affiliations. Because, again, I am just a man, standing in front of a black mirror, asking my parasocial viewer to love nonpartisan analysis of security affairs. So if you see someone who says something like this, whether it is in the comment section of another of my videos or elsewhere, then show them this video. It might just improve the political discourse. But we are getting ahead of ourselves, aren't we? Trump picked his plan. It is a bold strategy, Tom Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them. Well, that is it for day 30-something in a row. Hopefully this side of me will not come out again until well after the streak is broken. For now, check out one of these calmer alternatives. And if you enjoyed today's video, then please like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you next time. Take care.